Hello, and welcome back to The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode, in honor of the 72nd Annual DGA Awards, we're bringing back our annual series of episodes devoted to our popular Meet the Nominees Theatrical Feature Film Symposium. Now in its 29th year, the event is a roundtable discussion with the directors nominated for the Guild's Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Feature Film. This year's nominees include Bong Joon Ho, the director of Parasite, Sam Mendes, the director of 1917, Martin Scorsese, the director of The Irishman, Quentin Tarantino, the director of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Taika Waititi, the director of Jojo Rabbit. These talented directors were gathered on January 25th at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, with Mr. Scorsese joining via video from New York, and director Bong accompanied by his translator Sharon Choi, to discuss the craft of directing and the making of their films with moderator Jeremy Kagan. So please enjoy part 2 of our Meet the Nominees special, and listen to the 5 nominees share their tips on dealing with anxiety, how they tackle pre-production issues, and the language they use to adjust an actor's performance. Listen on for their spoiler-filled conversation.
When you get anxious, when, that, I don't know what's what do you do? What do you do to calm yourself when you get anxious in the process?
Me?
Yeah, you first. You first.
These days it's funny, but it's, I'm getting to a quiet place and sometimes even meditating. Just going with it. First, expressing my anxiety to whoever will listen. Whoever walking up the street. Listen, I have all right. I just wanted a fresh opinion. I go back and forth, and finally it's you. And you just go in, take a few moments. And used to be years ago, play a lot of music, but that has changed somewhat. The music is still played in my developing of the film and sometimes on set, but in the trailer and stuff like that, no, it's quiet.
Got it. Bong, how about for you? When you get anxious, what do you do? How do you calm yourself?
단 거를 먹어요.
I eat sugar.
이게 저기 뭐 많이 있어 그래서.
So I always have a bunch of chocolate and candy around the monitor at all times.
Good. That's good.
It works?
그리고 이제
Yes, and also I always go back to my storyboard. The reason why I draw my own storyboards is because I'm anxious. There are so many great directors who don't use storyboards, but for me, I draw every shot myself. And my crew members are also great in following my storyboards, so that's my process.
불안하면 꺼내갖고 다시 이렇게 보고 있는 거죠.
So basically, I take out my anxiety from my heart and study it.
이대로 될 것이다.
It will happen this way.
In this experience on this movie, was there one or two major things that worried you? I mean, this really does worry me about this particular film.
그 홍수 시퀀스 때문에 걱정을 많이 했는데요.
I was very worried about the flood sequence.
그 물속에 들어가서 오랜 시간 찍어야 돼요.
Because we had to spend a long time in the water shooting that sequence, and water is always very difficult to deal with. I heard that Spielberg, after he shot Jaws, he was like, I will never shoot water ever again.
물론 뭐 되게 조그만 물이긴 한데.
Of course, it wasn't as extensive with Parasite, but we prepared a lot for that sequence, and that's why we built the entire poor neighborhood inside a water tank. And when we started building houses in this water tank, all the employees at that water tank found it very bizarre because usually they shoot people swimming there or ship sequences, and we were building houses.
How about for you, Quentin? What do you do with your anxiety and worries?
Well, the only thing that really, there can be a weird situation that happens versus this scene versus another scene during the course of a shoot, but the only scenes that actually really make me anxious are like the big cinematic set pieces. I mean, if we've done our job and if I'm happy with the way the scene is written, if it's just a scene between 2 or 3 actors sitting there talking to each other, I'm not anxious about that. I figure I've got good actors where I like the scene, so it's all going to be good. It's going to be the way it's supposed to be. But the big cinematic set pieces or the action scenes or something like that, that's where I get a little nervous because I want it to be fucking great. I want it to be as good as anybody's ever done it before. And I want it to go in the annals of great action scenes of all time. And for all time. And I know whether or not I'll have pulled that off or not. And even if I can fool the audience, I'll know whether or not, it wasn't as good as blah, 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 or it was, it's okay, it's good, but it's not one of the best ever. And I'm, nervous that this is where I discover the limits of my talent. But I actually think that's kind of what I'm trying to do is your talent has a ceiling, and I keep wanting to find where the ceiling is. I'm risking hitting my head on the roof. And so that's the stuff that I'm always fucking nervous about. So it's like, so in a movie like this, the 2 days leading up to doing the big fight at the end, which I'm changing, the Spawn Ranch sequence, or the Bruce Lee fight. Those are the scenes. Everything else was easy, all right? More or less. There's logistical stuff. But that's the only one where it's like, it's a calliope of cinema. It all has to work together. And I'm not using second unit, and I'm not going to go back. It's like if whatever decisions we make on those 4 days or 5 days, that's it. And so those are my anxieties. And like literally the only thing out of it is just get started. Just get started. You show up on the day and you're like nervous and you're like a little irritable and I've been thinking about it all the night before and everything. Just get it going. Get your shot list going. Get shot 1, get shot 2, get shot 3, and now you're in it. And now you don't have time to have anxiety about it anymore. You might have anxiety about trying to pull off a shot inside of there, but literally once I'm on to shot 3, I'm in it. But starting that climb up the Himalayas can be a little tough.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you. Taika, what about for you?
The entire thing makes me very nervous and anxious, and I don't like. It's a myriad of things sort of pile up. I have a condition. I haven't asked anyone about it. I've self-diagnosed it, but I think that when I get too stressed out, and I really hate this about me, but I fall asleep a lot. I can't stay awake, and so I'm barely awake right now. So intimidating being in this room, but I feel like and so there's now become like a collection of photographs of me asleep on sets of all of my films and TV, like anything I've done. I will sneak off into a corner and people find me curled up in a ball asleep like a cat who's trying to die, and so I guess that's how I deal with it. But it can be so many things that set me off. Actors first. You've got an idea of what you want to do, and the thing that really wigs me out is like this will be like 6 actors, grown-up actors, are the worst. They come in and they've got all their ideas about, I thought my character was molested when, I want to put that in here. I think my character should do the scene up in that tree over there. And so you spend most of your day convincing them not to be in the tree and somehow kind of getting them back to your original idea that you were trying to do without being an asshole. And so... But then eventually, and then part of it's time, and then also, and the other thing is trying to get everyone to just stay with you and believe in you, because it can be, especially for me, because I've written most of my own things, and this film in particular, I felt was like a big career ender, and I thought, I've had a good run, I'll give this one a go, and see how this could work, and especially not me being in it and playing that idiot in the film, And there's just something about just trying to get the crew to follow you with that. You feel it's very hard to keep everyone motivated and say like, hey, this is my cool idea. I really think it's going to work. Please believe in this. And then it all came, I mean, the worst experience I had on that film was I actually had, I was seen on the river when Scarlett and Roman were having their heart-to-heart about love, and we were shooting most of it from across the river. And I had to keep running across to go and like check with the crew and like make sure they were framing things right, because we didn't have cables to go across the river and the radios weren't working. And I guess it's a big admission. I was dressed as Hitler, and I started screaming across the river at the crew. Not proud of it. And I'll take that with me to my grave, how embarrassed I was. But it was like that was the moment I thought, this is never going to work. And curled up in a ball and went to sleep.
It may be a good methodology for all of us to learn. Sam, what do you do when you're getting anxious?
Well, I mean, I thought my movie was a high wire act, but at least I wasn't dressed as fucking Hitler trying to make it. The more I think about it, the worse it seems. Jesus Christ. I've done a very good job of hiding my inner Hitler all these years. Yeah, I think I'm a little bit like Marty. I find that I have to be quiet now. Maybe I'm just getting older, but I think I have two ways of switching off. Well, actually three: chocolate, like Bong, quiet, like Marty, and watching sport. And I find that if I sit in the silence or watch sport for long enough in the evening, if there's a little man who pops up onto my shoulder going, "You f***ed the scene today. It's not right," he will appear. At some point in the evening, he will pop up and he will interrupt my sleep. And by the next day, I will know that I have to do something about it. And I've learned that little person, he makes a fairly regular appearance early on in the shoot. He's annoyingly present. I mean, it goes way back to my first movie, to American Beauty, when the first day he was on my shoulder saying that wasn't right. And I reshot the first 2 days of that movie, and I sort of wait for him a little bit. So now I know he might turn up. So God, I sound completely insane, don't I?
Not yet.
Maybe I should be lying on the couch. Anyway, so yeah, but I do have to get into some negative space and peace and quiet in order to work out what I think. I think that's really why. I mean,
you're constantly fighting against this idea, well, I am, that, somehow someone's eventually going to find out that you don't know what you're doing. And that's why I'm like, when is he going to realize?
Yeah, it's a kind of a syndrome that I'm just learning about it.
Yeah.
Talk about, for all of you, in the pre-production process. I'd like you to talk about sort of working with your assistant director in terms of sort of taking on all of the problems that are possibly going to be your challenges. On this particular one, I know you had at least 6 months in which that was your pre-production. There may have been more before that, but talk about that process in this particular film.
It was really, really enjoyable. That's the first thing to say, because we were trying to solve the same problem all at the same time. I mean, we didn't have particularly, it sounds ridiculous. Like we had the actors rehearsing for 6 months. Well, we didn't rehearse just with them for 6 months. They were simply part of what we all know is a decent, lengthy pre-production period. And the fact that actors are not normally part of that, it never really struck me until so strongly as with this movie, because we couldn't do anything until they started speaking. Because everything we did was based around rhythm and the length of time it would take to make the journey. So we couldn't start digging a trench until we'd walked the scene on an empty field. So we started literally with an empty field with 2 actors with their scripts. And we marked out the trench sides with poles. And every time we got to a scene or a left fork or a right fork, we marked it with a different color pole, and another scene and another scene. I had 2 of the younger actors playing all the other roles. So there were 4 actors for 6 months. And that goes, so, it wasn't until we'd walked out the trenches that we started digging them. We dug over a mile of trenches, and it worked in layers, one after the other. And that went for no man's land and fields and farmhouses and woods and orchards. We couldn't start anything until we had walked it with the actors.
And when you were walking with the actors, because there's times when they're silent, there's times, because they're not all talking and then arriving.
No.
How did you all work that out so that you finally said, okay, we're going to start here, and then we turn left?
That was just instinct. That comes from, you see, as a theatre director, I am not unused to trying to establish rhythm and tempo of an evening without cutting. I am used to handling silence as well as dialogue, and to try to reach for an understanding of how long that tension can be retained without speech. And that's what I was trying to do all the time with this movie. For me, the most difficult scenes are people, you talk about the bigger set pieces. Actually, the most difficult scenes by far were the scenes in which they were just walking and not speaking. The first scene of the movie gave me the most sleepless nights, because I wanted to feel, it's the only time in the movie before they get given their mission, effectively, that I just wanted them to be, to talk about things that they might talk about, to not talk when they didn't feel like talking, and to read a letter, to sort of idly talk about what's in the letter, maybe what's for supper, and through the cracks of that little conversation, gradually reveal the details of who they were and how long they'd been there, and the differences between the two men. But I didn't want it to be expositional. I didn't want it to be on the nose. So those were the scenes that it took real courage for me to say to Dean, who was playing Blake at the beginning, okay, you got a letter, just read the letter. And he kept saying, but it's taking too long, isn't it taking too long? I said, no, just take the time it takes to actually read the letter, put it in, fold it up, put it back in your pocket, and say what's in the letter. And those are the things that took the courage for me. What then happened was that watching them and being with them all that time, I was able to very gently direct them. First of all, I watched them a lot, watched the way they were with each other, the way they were physically. They became friends off camera, which was very helpful to me. And I was able to just let it cook a little bit rather than come at them with, specific directions early. And also watch the way that they were naturally in the land and the landscape, and the way they moved. And of course, we had the operator there with us the whole time. Often different operators, different rigs, and Roger Deakins. And we were a little small unit, just walking through fields, and then gradually it emerged out of that. And if you think about the sequence that you showed at the beginning here, that did start with me and a script running across an empty backlot at Shepperton and saying, I think he's going to throw himself down here. Here is where I want him to look up. Here is where I want the flares to be. Here is where I want him to stop in the corner. I want him to go through this little store here. So this is where and planting flags and just walking it myself. That process started actually when I was doing Skyfall, and I wanted Javier Bardem's first speech to be one long take and no cuts. I wanted him to approach the camera very slowly. So I started just reading the speech, me and my script supervisor, trying to judge the length of time and the speed at which he'd be walking. And then we constructed the set around the speech. And it occurred to me, actually, what you have to do is you have to construct the environments, but only when you know the rhythm of the dialogue. Because obviously, if you have a dialogue that's taking place in an orchard, and they run out of things to talk about, you've got 30 seconds of dead time and they're just walking, or the other way around. They've got too much to talk about and they stop. The orchard stops before they stop. So everything had to be constructed.
Turning left, turning left and turning right, which becomes a lot of the sort of the maze. Did you go through a process of working out a design of that before you then actually were on these fields and walking it?
Yeah, if you study the way the trenches were built, I won't bore you with it now, but there are 4 lines. There's the rear trench, third line, second line, front line, and then there's the comms trenches that link each trench. They're one-way streets. Some go up, some go down. They're built crenellated. They've got zigzags in them because if an enemy drops into them and opens fire, if it's straight, then they can wipe out 1,000 men like that. So they have to build them in zigzags. And when you go into them yourself, you're in this maze, and you very quickly, particularly if the sun's in, you lose your sense of direction. You don't know where you are. So that feeling and the way in which each trench had a different atmosphere. Some go through railway cottages, some are a little bit more organized. And when you get to the front line, you feel this deadness of people waiting, just waiting. And also the pounding it's taken for 3 years, this thing. So it's been destroyed and rebuilt. And so you have to do that with the production design. You have to construct these layers of this sort of history of it. And this sense of men just waiting, sleeping, eating, shitting, dying, all in the same space. The fucking smell of it, the awful, just the dead. And we had one photograph pinned on the wall, Roger Deakins and I. It was the framing, it was everything about it. It just seemed to be our movie. We didn't have a lot of examples of other movies that have been in the same world, other than the obvious ones, Piles of Glory, etc. But the way in which the movie moved and spoke was different from many of those. So we had this. We went back to source photographs, and one of them, it was just a photograph of 3 guys. They were having breakfast. They were sitting on the parapet of a trench, and about 20 feet away was a pile of bodies waiting to be buried. And it was just the normality of it. It was the fact that there was nothing. They were just going to have their breakfast and then bury their friends. And it just was everything that movie was trying to be, that the 2 things could coexist in the same frame, that the eye had time to go from one to the other, that you were able to, the framing of it, and also the lens. I mean, we didn't want it to be very long lens point of view. We didn't want it to be very subjective, like a movie like Son of Saul, which I thought was a magnificent film, but very, very subjective. Everything dropping out of focus beyond our hero. Nor did we want it to be super wide. We didn't want it to be like, The Revenant, for example, which I loved, but very, very wide lenses. It's really shot on a very, very ordinary, it's on a 40 millimeter lens. That's what it is. The whole movie. It has a certain amount of drop, but we're trying to find a way of not dressing it up.
And figuring out in pre-production how long a take would be, how you would hand off cameras to cameras. Can you talk a little bit about that in pre-production?
Well, one of the things Roger Deakins and I talked about a lot was, let's talk about why before we talk about how. So we just talked about what we wanted the camera to do and why emotionally. At what point do we want it to be intimate? At what point do we want to see the geography, understand the nature of their journey? At what point do we want the image to see them tiny in a giant epic landscape? At what point do we want to see what they see but not them? And sometimes we want to see them and not what they see. It was a way of trying to use the usual tools of film grammar without cutting, but not ever stinting on what we would normally want from a movie at that point. I prefer to talk about it as a movie with no cuts rather than a one-shot movie. To me, we were trying all the time to develop this language, this dance between the camera, the actors, and the landscape, all 3 of which were moving all the time. And I don't know what the other guys would say, but to me, it doesn't matter how much you plan. At the end of the day, it's just, there's an instinct that kicks in. This is what I think it should be. And it's not always logical, it's not always rational, and there aren't necessarily rules. It's just, this is what I feel like it is. And so it's just having the time with me and Roger just to talk about it. We did storyboard it. We often storyboarded it over and over again until we got the right version. Like a sequence where he crosses the canal at one point across a broken bridge. We storyboarded that 6 times until we found the right way to tell the story. Because I was very determined that the movie was always pushing forward in this sort of threatening way. And I couldn't find a way to get him to, if you imagine, he had to look across the distance he had to jump, and then he had to look over the edge, then he had to go back, take a run up and jump. And I didn't like that because it meant the camera was going forward, back, and forward again. And I felt we were going back over our steps. And that really bugged me. And I kept trying to find a way where we could see his thought process as to how he was going to get across without the camera stopping, moving forward. So there was this threat, this sense that we were being pulled through the movie rather than just being presented with images, that you were being forced to walk like he was. And that was a kind of gut instinct. So a lot of the time we were just talking about it until we found the right solution. And as I said earlier, when we did, it was like, yeah, that's it. And we didn't really have to talk about it again. And very, very few of the shots changed their fundamental nature when we were shooting. I mean, normally I would go on set and a little bit like what Quentin described, with his last scene, you make changes all the time. because you see it and someone has a better idea than you, or you see the scene differently, but suddenly you're on set and there's a shot over there that's much more interesting, or what you planned somehow disappoints you, or whatever it is. But in this one, we'd been through that process. We'd constructed this dance, and then it was just adding layers. So we rarely changed it.
Got it. Thank you. In pre-production for you, Taika, obviously finding the city has got to have been one of the major issues, but what were some of the challenges for you in pre-production, besides putting your crew and cast, but which one would come up for you?
The casting was a big thing. Finding kids, finding enough children, and also where to shoot with the kids. Like originally we were going to shoot in Germany, but they've really sorted out their human rights issues, and you can only shoot with a kid in Germany for 3 hours. So yeah, I know. And so we thought, well, we'll go out to the Eastern Bloc countries because it'd be way easier. Only 5 hours out there. But we ended up in Prague because they still had the architecture and everything. Incidentally, New Zealand, 10 hours. Way better. We're really working down there. But Prague had and the outlying areas still, all the architecture was still intact because it hadn't been bombed, and so we decided to go there, and it just various reasons made more sense. Then also just I guess the period vehicles and everything are becoming more scarce, and because it wasn't a massive budget, we were having to kind of trade things off. So like we wanted a certain amount of extras that would be, I'd say I'd really like more people in the town square. And I said, well, you have to swap a car for 10 people. And vice versa. Like if I wanted more vehicles, I could get rid of extras. So I was figuring out throughout the scene, like where we could like spend the money and get what we wanted. And then the rest of it, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Pre-production, I did a lot of rehearsals with the kids. In creating the destroyed city, can you talk about in pre-production how that evolved? It was like some shots, it's like a little bit of sort of set extension and CG stuff, but there were some places outside of Prague where we got to shoot, which were sort of demolished, like factories and things like that, which I think is sort of a few people have gone there before. It was great. It was good there. And turning into winter, when you had that sequence there, again, I'm wondering, as you were thinking of this before actually shooting. Yeah, we went back in winter, did some pickups. I usually try and build pickups into my schedules because I always know I'm going to go back for something. Is storyboarding part of your process for this, or was it? And if not, how do you communicate? Just various things. If it's a dialogue scene, or I don't bother. But if it's something that feels a bit more complicated or something where I know, I want the camera to end up in a certain place, then I'll do that. But it's mainly for myself. So there are lots of sort of, in terms of, again, pre-production stuff, like the props and, in particular, all of the signages, all the posters. I'm interested in how those evolved. Obviously, you had to have them before you're on set. Where do they come from? Well, they're all, we did a lot of research, and they're all very authentic stuff. And, I mean, that was a sort of the uncomfortable thing as well, is putting all that stuff back up in these places. Like the main square where they have the gallows and stuff is a square where Hitler did one of his rallies and stuff. And so we'd put these big banners up, and you really get the feeling people were, they're back. And so it was a real, like, it wasn't, because it's already like the sort of, and we shot in Barrendorf Studios, which was built by the Nazis for their propaganda films. And so even that has this sort of like strange, heavy residue around it, hanging over it. So you're in there in these stages where they shot all these films. And outside of Babelsberg, Prague is probably the next big place to go and shoot these films. And so at any given point, walking down the hallways of the studios, you'd see these other Nazi soldiers walking towards you. Those are our Nazis. There's someone else's Nazis. There's because there's different productions going on, and you don't know who's, where the soldiers belong to which production and stuff. And so everyone's like looking at it, they've got a cannon. Where'd they get that cannon from? We want to get one.
Let me ask you a question, because I've shot at Babelsberg. Who had Goebbels' office?
Oh, I don't know. I hope it wasn't me.
No, yeah, no,
Was there a real one?
Garibald's office. Our production manager had Garibald's office.
Maybe appropriate if you think about it. In designing the home where they live, which I think has 2 floors besides the hidden space, talk about how that evolved in pre-production before you actually, obviously built it.
Answer that.
They will.
We built the entire interior of the house, and it was Ra Vincent, who I've worked with for years, and we just every room was very different, and the whole palette of the film was very colourful, and so that was a real decision just from looking at a lot of footage and doing some research. It was a very colourful time, and there was like a lot of the architecture was very colourful, the fashion was very forward at the time in Germany, and they were wearing a lot of the textiles that they took from other places, and so they were, for them it was a party that just wouldn't stop. And so when we first got there, we asked wardrobe and stuff, can we see the stuff you've got from your archives? And they would wheel in all these big racks of clothes, but everything was brown and grey. And so a lot of the builders were very surprised to have to use bright colours in the interior of the house and everything, because they're so used to, very desaturated and gloomy sets and gloomy wardrobe, which I get. It's a good reason for that. But for us, we wanted it to just feel a little brighter, not because there were jokes in the film, just because it was authentic and actually, and also the idea that because there's a great book you should read called Blitzed, which is about the drug industry in Nazi Germany, and basically the entire country was high on meth for the entire time and partying. And when they knew that the Russians were coming and the war was then that it was all over for them, they went even crazier and partied even harder, just knowing that they were going to look glamorous and go out in style and off their faces.
By the way, the headboard of the bed in the house is a pretty remarkable headboard. I assume that someone, your production designer or props people, said, "Do you like this? Do you want this? Do you remember this particular moment?" Because it stands out.
Yeah, I do remember that. You're right. No, all that stuff. I was like. So some of it's creepy because they'd offer up things with vintage, Hitler Youth knives and things and the actual kits, the backpacks and all this, the kits that they would take to these camps, and part of me wanted to burn it, and the other part was we need these, and so it sort of felt conflicted. But also a lot of those props and things, they're beautifully made things, and the furniture and stuff is incredible, and it's a beautiful craftsmanship there as well. The builders were the floors were most of the things in the house were built in the old style as well. Right. And it was.
Marty,
then we tore it down.
I'm going to jump over. I want to hear pre-production issues, but Marty, I'm not sure about timing here. If you have time to answer the question about there's so many locations, but your pre-production issues, if you've got time. I know there's something else going on for you, but.
Sorry. But I'm listening. It's extraordinary what I'm hearing. Of course, the way I always approach it is I find that again, the way Bong was talking about the insecurities or anxieties, I play it. I draw it all out, and usually whether they're actual drawings or notation drawings, smaller drawings, including, in many cases, editing patterns, movement in frame, camera movement within the frame, forward, back, whatever. In a hotel, usually, or in a place where I could be quiet for 8 or 9 days and just do with music and deal with it as best I can. Lay it all out completely, because it's going to change, but I have, not all the time, by the way, but when it does change, at least I go back to my original. Even in some cases, certain pencils I use, the original drawings and the impact, I should say, the impression of the actual pencil, not a Xerox of it. I remember the camera moved then, and or the impulse for that. This picture is different because I had to do that, but the style, what I wanted to do was have the film had to be anonymous. There had to be an anonymity to the look of the picture, yet within the frame, there had to be the emotional impact. And therefore, it was what not to do, what to take away, and ultimately when to do the last little brushstroke in a shot or a performance, so to speak. And finding many different reasons, including the CGI issues with the 6 lenses and that sort of thing, eliminating even more so than usual on set, not necessarily taking extra shots that I know, because there was so many locations that I know that in the editing I might want to try, not try. I say, I don't need it. I simply don't need it. A lot of that happened when I was doing silence too in Taiwan. And so it was a matter really of having the strongest emotional impact within something that looks, car going by, shot of a restaurant, person sitting at a table. We didn't try to emphasize anything, really. Yes, there's some camera movements and things like that, but bottom line was anonymity and at the same time emotional and psychological power. And so this all had to be played out by myself, basically in a room, and then ultimately checking out the locations. And sometimes it's fun. I didn't do anything on certain scenes. I get there and I say, okay, we move from here to here, But by that point, I had I knew where the impulse was coming from. I knew what my foundation was for the look of the picture. And who knows, I could make another, maybe a similar thing. I don't know. But it's simplifying it.
Marty, did you build anything on this piece, or what did you build, or is almost all of it practical?
No, we built the house, for the interior of the house, Frank and his second wife and his first wife and their kids in the kitchen. That's an example when he comes back home and he discovers that his daughter's been pushed by the grocer. I saw him come in the door. A little girl is sitting in that doorway. He goes by. He says, off camera character, he says, "What's the matter with her?" And his wife answers, and as she answers, we carry him over to his wife. We then take him back to his daughter, and then we let him take the daughter out the door. One shot. That was done there. I had a feeling of freedom that way. And I know those rooms. I grew up in some of those places like that. So I know what it's like going from one place. See, the house that Jimmy Hoffa supposedly was shot in the interior was a set. At that point, however, I designed it in such a way that it was about the quietness of the frames, particularly when De Niro enters this place. You see a character you've never seen before in the movie cutting up a carpet, and the guy looks at him and he says, "Hi, Frank," and he says, "Hi, Sally." And the kid says, Sally says, "Chucky's late." Who's Chucky? Sally? Hi, Frank? Who are these people? To give the impression and to keep in the audience's mind that this can all be a setup to kill Frank, you see. Frank then looks up at the first floor landing, and he looks inside to his right. There's nobody in that room. That's dangerous. But put the camera in the other room. De Niro walks across and through the room. As he comes forward towards camera, he notices 2 other people in the kitchen. And then we just pan him over. He checks out the kitchen, and we pan him back. I was tempted to take a close-up of that. And when that happened, the nature of the body language, the sense of danger, the feeling of the creaking of the floor of the house, even though it was a set, this I knew was the essence of the film, you see. Taking it further, when he does shoot Jimmy in this film, what I did was after Jimmy gets shot, I pull the walls away and we pull back to a proscenium, and obviously a set. I don't think many people notice that, but it's obviously a set. And I was asked, aren't people going to tell us that it's okay? There's something psychologically that happens when his best friend is there on the ground, whom he's killed. He's laid out on the ground. He puts the gun on him, straightens his shirt, he leaves, and we stay on the body. And the body is like a tableau, a presentation, a sacrifice, to this life. It actually goes back to this incredible impression that I had for this movie called Autumn Leaves, that Robert Aldrich directed, Joan Crawford and Cliff Robertson, I think his first film. He's a pathological liar, and I'd seen him as 12 years old or whatever, and he's obviously has a serious mental problem. She's in love with him. He's much younger. There's a scene at night when they're in their beds, and he's having all kinds of emotional problems, and there's a scene at night that she's sleeping, and she hears him crying, and she turns around and looks, and she sees him by the wall. He's standing up, but he's crying. Then the camera cuts, and it's as if it's a glass wall, and you're looking at him, and his hands are up like this, and she comes up and comforts him, tries to comfort him. Now, there's nothing like that in the movie. That's on one shot, and somehow that bold move was so disorienting. You really get the impression of a person who has lost their ability to cope, their ability to discern reality from fantasy. You really get that. And I was about 11 or 12, and I've never forgotten over that one cut and that one image. And so for me, it was that kind of thing, to find the restraint and find the emotional power within a frame that had to feel anonymous.
Were there any, another question here, were there any scenes or moments in performance, because I sort of asked you to all think about this before we started here, there where you needed to readjust the performance of one of your actors, and how did you do that? And it may not be true here, but maybe there was one or two, and we're just as directors to directors, what you say or do when you want to change a performance. Were there any moments that stand out for you here where that happened, and how do you handle it?
I think in this picture we had by the time we were able to get the financing for the film, the people involved were already in those parts in a sense, and they know each other for years too. I never worked with Al Pacino before, but I always wanted to. Bob and Al, what you see in the film, they draw on their 40-year relationship as friends and as actors. You know, it's there. Pesci, we know for many years. Sometimes it was a matter of getting the right kind of insinuation without it being insinuating with Joe's dialogue, and how to make an impression, how to say, you're doing this, but without saying you're doing this. For example, when he tells this guy towards the end of the film, he starts a scene. This was not in the script. It was something that I said, let me think about it further. He sets up, he tells this young guy to go and kill somebody in Northern California. And there were all kinds of problems in the script. You have to understand that this guy stole jewels from him. He's a jeweler, back and forth, back. I tried all these different things. And finally, I said, let's just stop the movie and have Pesci sitting there looking forward towards camera saying, there's a pork store in Northern California. Are you aware of this place near Walnut Creek? And you see this guy you never saw before. He goes, uh-huh. I'm looking for a favor, not for me, for a friend. And we'd like to get him down to Australia, see if you can help him. And ultimately, that undoes his situation. He gets arrested for that. But I found that to position Joe in such a way, and to have the quiet and the patience, didn't have to yell, didn't have to threaten. He's talking about a pork store in Northern California in Walnut Creek. What has this got to do with anything? You know, those were the issues as the picture was being shot that I found frightening, to find new ways to do it, or I should say refreshing ways to do it, or unexpected ways to do it, to keep the dramatic impact. Or De Niro sitting in his car in the car wash. I had all these shots planned for the car wash. I took one shot of him, and he's going through, and it's kind of in slow motion. And I said, that's the shot. Let's go home. When
Joe Pesci, when De Niro gets in the car after having killed Hoffa, there's a shot.
Oh, that's interesting, yeah.
There's a shot over Pesci, and De Niro's got in the car. He says nothing. And Pesci's moment of obviously knowing what's happened, I'm wondering, did you say anything to him? Did you?
This is a very good point, because in the script, it had something that Steve and I said, leave it in, don't worry about it. It said, the line was something like, how to have a good trip. I said, he would never say that. I said, leave it in. Let me hear what Joe has to say and see what Bob has to say. Have a good trip. Really? After what you've instructed this man who's so close to you to do? I just don't see anything. And we were sitting there. Remember, it was a very hot day, and it was on this tarmac. And we were talking, and I said, I just don't want to think. You sure? Maybe he could say this. Maybe he could say that. I don't know. Really, there's nothing you can say. And at some point, I don't know, it was Joe or Bob or me, somehow the thing about give me your glasses happened. Give me your sunglasses. And then we looked at each other, yeah, that's it. And then he said, hey, when he gets back, I forget who said this, when he gets back, I give back the glasses. I said, great. That's it. And so it became something like we all knew it had to happen. There had to be some kind of recognition of what was happening and what had been done. But it's by gesture rather than a line like, hey, did everything go okay? Did everything go okay? You don't say that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know what your timing is, Marty, but I'm going to go off to, are you still with us?
I do have to get back to the house.
I got it. All right. We're going to thank you very much for the time. You guys are up here for a little longer. I'm sorry. But Marty, thank you so much.
You guys, and Bong, I've met a number of times. Quentin, we know. And Sam, thank you for everything you've said about me. It's just extraordinary and so moving, and never forget it. Waititi, I mean, maybe we'll meet in a couple of weeks. I dare you.
See you. Look at me in sunglasses.
Thanks, Marty.
We hope you enjoyed listening to part 2 of this exclusive discussion. You can watch the full video of the Theatrical Feature Film Symposium on our website at dga.org/events. And be sure to download next week's episode, where our Theatrical Feature Film nominees will finish their conversation. Past episodes of The Director's Cut are available wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.